What is Red China? Red China refers to the Chinese Communist Party, the governing political party of mainland China with 90 million members. Red China was founded in 1921 and quickly grew into a force led by Mao Zedong. Red China then took over mainland China and drove the Kuomintang nationalist government to Taiwan after the Chinese Civil War. During its existence, Red China systematically killed millions of people with its socio-political experiments. Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward in 1959 to reconstruct the country from an agrarian economy into a communist society. Mao Zedong demanded local provinces to increase grain yields and brought industry to the countryside. As a result, local officials, afraid of not meeting the quotas set by Red China, over-collected what the farmers grew, leaving the population starved to death. The Great Leap Forward resulted in between 33 million and 55 million deaths, making the Great Chinese Famine the largest mass mortality event in human history. From 1950 to 1959, Red China annexed Tibet by force. They attacked Tibet in October 1950 and forced the Tibetan leaders to accept its terms unconditionally to allow Red China's People Liberation Army to occupy Tibet and installed a Chinese government. The 14th Dalai Lama, a spiritual and national leader of Tibetans, was invited by Red China's officials to a theatrical performance at the Chinese military headquarters in Lhasa on March 1, 1959. Tibetan government officials feared that the Chinese planned an abduction of the Dalai Lama. Tibetans surrounded the Dalai Lama's palace to prevent him from leaving or being removed. On March 12th, protesters appeared in the streets of Lhasa declaring Tibet's independence. On March 17, 1959, 2 artillery shells landed near the Dalai Lama's palace, triggering his flight into exile. The Dalai Lama secretly left the palace the following night and left Tibet with his family and a small number of officials. After bloody fighting, members of the Dalai Lama's bodyguard remaining in Lhasa were disarmed and publicly executed. Thousands of Tibetan monks were executed or arrested, and monasteries and temples around the city were looted or destroyed. In 1966, Mao attempted to purge his potential enemies by launching the Cultural Revolution. On the surface, its goal was to preserve Chinese communism by purging remnants of capitalism from Chinese society and to impose Mao Zedong thought as the dominant ideology in China. In reality, it was his campaign to solidify his power after the previous failed experiment of the Great Leap Forward. In order to eliminate his rivals within Red China, Mao formed the Red Guards, also known as rebel groups, around the country. Red Guards broke into the homes of the wealthy and destroyed paintings, books, and furniture. They began slaughtering millions of people, including the elderly and young children. Eventually, the Red Guards became a monstrous force, and their methods of slaughter included beating, whipping, strangling, trampling, boiling, and beheading. In 1974, China forcefully took control of the Paracel Islands from the Republic of Vietnam. And in 1988, China attacked its ally, Communist Vietnam, and occupied the Spratly Archipelago. Recently, China arbitrarily claimed 90% of the East Asian Ocean from its shore down to Indonesia. During the last few years, Red China has built artificial islands there with no regard for the environment and militarized them even though it had promised the world it would not do so.
Right, we continue our look this morning at what China does not want you to see. The United States says the superpower is reclaiming land in the South China Sea. Artificial islands under construction could become military bases.
Within China, student-led demonstrations in Beijing at Tiananmen Square during 1989 emphasized Red China's willingness to impose authoritarian rule with force on its own people. The protests started on April 15, 1989, and were forcibly suppressed on June 4, 1989, when the government declared martial law and sent the People's Liberation Army to occupy parts of central Beijing. Troops armed with assault rifles and accompanied by tanks fired at the demonstrators and those trying to block the military's advance into Tiananmen Square. Estimates of the death toll were several hundred to several thousand, with thousands more wounded. Red China's current leader is Xi Jinping, who commands the offices of the General Secretary, Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and State President, which makes him the ultimate power and authority over state and government affairs. Since assuming power, Xi has embarked upon a so-called anti-corruption campaign to consolidate power internally, doing away with political thorns that include former members of the Politburo Standing Committee. He instituted party rule, allowing him to stay in power forever. He's also promoted a more aggressive foreign policy, engaged in a trade war with the U.S., imposed baseless claims in the South China Sea, and doubled down on the Belt and Road Initiative as the lightning rod for his dream of returning China to its imperialist status. What is the Belt and Road Initiative? In 2013, Xi Jinping announced the Belt and Road Initiative in Kazakhstan. It is one of the most ambitious and expensive efforts to make China the center of the global economy. With $30 billion already invested in over 50 countries, the building of roads, railways, and ports is anticipated to cost over $2 trillion.
Through its Belt and Road Initiative, for example, the PRC is leveraging its overseas investments to force other nations into suboptimal security decisions.
I think the One Belt, One Road posture has been a stalking horse to advance Chinese security concerns. Minister Wei said as much in a Latin American conference just last summer.
Drawing inspiration from the old Silk Road, used 2,000 years ago to carry goods from east to west, Red China's signature policy vision hopes to revive these ancient trade routes and more. Red China's Belt and Road Initiative consists of two parts: the Belt, which follows the path of the historic Silk Road land route, and the Road, which, despite its name, refers to sea routes through various oceans. The Belt component of the Belt and Road Initiative is made up of 6 overland economic corridors. The road portion of the Belt and Road Initiative connects China to 7 different regions through the following maritime routes. Most Belt and Road agreements involve China investing enormous amounts of money into partner nations' infrastructure. By creating these loans, China is engaging in debt trap diplomacy, a strategy of extracting political concessions out of nations indebted to it. The Belt and Road Initiative is designed to boost China's influence with an economic infrastructure as well as military installations around the world. Many critics believe the Belt and Road Initiative's true objective is to rob poorer countries of sovereignty and increase Chinese political will in the region to push along Red China's world domination ambition.
So then, what's the real rationale behind China's development of these infrastructure projects in the Indian Ocean and in the Pacific? Well, one thing we found is that they are strategically located along important sea lanes. These are the transport lines for the energy and raw materials that China needs, and corridors for the finished products that China exports. It makes sense that Chinese officials have now begun speaking more openly about the need to secure the sea lanes that they depend on and to safeguard the large number of Chinese workers involved in BRI projects around the world. You can see the strategic importance of the Gwadar port in Pakistan and their Hambantota port in Sri Lanka in that sense. Both are situated along China's maritime lifeline in the Indian Ocean. And Gwadar sits right at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. It's the gateway to the Middle East. The BRI port projects that China has developed in Myanmar and in Cambodia are at either end of the Malacca Strait. That's a potential choke point for China's access to the rest of the world. So the geography means that China has strategically located facilities that could bolster the PLA's ability to operate by providing logistics support, even though these ports aren't fortified bases. And the Chinese, it turns out, have a term for this: strategic strong points. Now, under Chinese law, all ports, at home or overseas, must be designed to meet PLA standards to accommodate Chinese Navy ships. And under China's civil-military fusion principle, Chinese port operators, shipping lines, all Chinese companies are legally required to support the PLA, not just in war, but in peacetime as well. What that adds up to is BRI commercial projects that are designed as dual-use strategic strongpoints that could be militarized in the future. This fits with what is called the civilian first, military later approach in Chinese doctrine. In the meantime, as civilian ports, these strategic strongpoints expand the Chinese Navy's logistics network and its ability to conduct operations overseas. But in fact, they do far more than that, because they serve as a platform for Chinese influence in the host country and in the region. In the 4 major projects that we examined, Chinese companies have long-term leases or majority stakes in every one of the ports. And that means that they have de facto operational control of each port. And all 4 are built to something the Chinese call the port park city model. What that means is that each port is just one part of a bigger industrial project with businesses to support things like resupply and ship repair, businesses that put Chinese operators in a better position to service both commercial and naval ships. And this port park city model connects to Chinese digital programs like Smart Cities and Safe Cities. Those are programs with enhanced surveillance technology that collects big data that's very, very useful to Beijing. And it also links them to the digital Silk Road and increases reliance on Huawei and other Chinese tech companies for telecommunications. Under another program called the BRI Space Information Corridor, Beijing has launched the Chinese alternative to GPS, the Beidou satellite network, and they're working to connect BRI countries under their system. So all of these interlinked programs make for a growing dependence on China. It's more and more levers that Beijing can use to extract concessions or to get compliance from project host states. Oh, and did I mention that all 4 of the countries where these ports are located are heavily in debt to China?